Welcome back. As I said on our last podcast, we have another special interview this week with Mr. Charlie Kirk, the founder of Turning Point USA. Turning Point is a grassroots college-based nonprofit dedicated to educating students on conservative values like free market capitalism and limited government. So, let's get right to it. I'm Anthony Leonardi, and I'm with Norman Young, and this is Think Outside Politics. So, Norm, the first question I asked Charlie had to do with a point he previously made on the last interview that I had with him. And he said that the rise of socialism is directly correlated with the secularization of society. And I was curious to see what he meant by that. So let's go to that clip. Can you expound on that?
Sure.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, there's really good living examples of that. So let's focus on the UK, the United Kingdom, where traditionally the structure of the United Kingdom is the Queen is the head of the church, the Anglican Church. So the church is really built into their society and their structure. And yet, you've seen since 1955 and 1960, the church-going rates have gone down dramatically, and they've become in a very secularized society, way more than America. Why? It's because they've embraced social welfare policies that have made the church less important. I mean, the church was the original place of social welfare. If you look at the early teachings of the church in 200, 300, and 400 AD, people, if you needed help, medical care, food, you went to the church, and it wasn't called. It was, it's obviously different language, but essentially the place of convening. And the church, the modern day Christian church, has done way more to help the poor than government ever will, ever. And so when government says, oh no, we'll do that, people stop going to church, people stop contributing. So that's kind of the technical part of it and the policy, but also from more of a philosophical and a meaning part of it, most people do good because it makes them feel good. Not a lot of people do good because it's the right utility, or it's going to maximize and help a lot of people. And so it's very easy to make people feel good to say we're going to take money from these people and give it to another group of people, right? But in essence, as government starts to do that, it becomes God. You become a philosopher king. And so the politicians become the deities in their own eyes almost. Like, we have so much power, we can try to fix the problems and the injustices.
Where dystopic version of Plato's
without a doubt. Oh, and this is what you see repeated time and time again. The founding fathers understood this and tried to prevent against it by decentralized government, really trying to reinforce states' rights and citizen government, so on and so forth. And so the bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. But also, I want a big God, small government. And I think we're getting away from that.
Do you think it's the role of conferences like this to talk about God? You've had your director of urban outreach.
Sure, I think we've done it.
Like I was in church when he was speaking, and then Ali Stuckey, who talked about God.
Sure,
of God.
And look, if we have a speaker that's an atheist, they should say that. We don't censor any of our speakers. They might say some swear words, whatever. We don't want them to, but if they do, we're not going to prevent them, right? And if they want to talk about ideas, we had Dave Rubin, who's a liberal, who's a pro-gay marriage, obviously openly gay married man, who is pro-drug legalization, who is still considers himself a liberal. I'm not sure what else he's liberal on. I mean, I can't figure it out.
Pro-choice.
Yeah, I think he's a conservative. He'll get there, or a freedom lover, and. There's a lot of different voices here at Turning Point USA, and in conferences past we've had guys that have run for president under the Libertarian ticket. We've had adamant never Trumpers, and so from your point, if someone wants to talk about God and we actually didn't tell them to do it, that's a really cool thing, and more power to them.
So I wanted to start by summarizing Charlie Kirk's philosophical point on this, and it boils down to this. He says that there is an individual, and they do good because it feels good, and they know it's good, not because it's a utilitarian viewpoint. They do it because it feels good. And why does it feel good? And he makes a contrast there. He says the secularist says it's because it is the duty of the state. The secularist rejects God. That is the prerequisite to being a secularist. So they say the reason why it is good is because that is the role of the state. That is the role of the government to do good towards others. And that is why you need to implement socialism. That is why you need to take care of your citizens through socialized medicine, through socialized education, through other socialist policies. The person that puts God before the government says that is a distortion of what we are saying. There's a reason why in the New Testament it says, give to Caesar's what is Caesar's and give to God's what is God's. Because God has commanded each and every individual to live as his son did on earth. That is why when Jesus says, the way you treat the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you do to me. And that is the emphasis, that the individual needs to practice and do good things to other people, because that is the same as treating Jesus this way. And that is why you need to take care of the poor. That is why you need to clothe the homeless and feed them. That is why you need to make sure that you tend to your neighbors in your community as a private individual. There's a separation there. And the person that puts God before government, and as Charlie said, big God, little government, recognizes that that is the definition of why it is good, because we're fulfilling the mandate of Jesus.
Right. And if I can try to summarize that, Charlie Kirk seems to me to be saying, and I think this is a profound point, that your conscience, right? When he says feel good, to me, I think what he's saying is that you get the approval of your conscience.
Yes.
So like when you do good to others, it has that. He doesn't mean it brings you pleasure. He means it brings you the fulfillment of having your conscience approve of your actions. And when that happens, and when that conscience is tied to God or something outside of the state or religion or religious community, that is better than when the state tells you you can feel good simply by participation in the state.
Yes.
When you're allowing yourself to feel your conscience assuaged simply by participation in the state, you're basically turning the state into God. And I think that's a pretty darn profound point.
Yeah, for sure. But I wanted to get to your point too, because you had an analysis of why it has to do with Plato and G.K. Chesterton a little bit. But I want to get your viewpoint as a secularized society, why socialism tends to rise too.
Well, I've had a lot of thoughts on socialism and why it's arising. Why is it arising today? Like, why is Ocasio-Cortez getting popular? Or is it more of historically why socialism is always going to be popular?
I like to get your historical.
Okay, sure. Socialism, you brought up Chesterton, so I might as well start from where he is. Chesterton has some interesting perspective on socialism, and one of the quotes that some of the capitalist diehards or market fundamentalists don't like is the one where he says, "Those who can't even see the capitalist problem deserve the Bolshevist solution," or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, and so basically he's saying if you can't see why people have a problem with capitalism, then you deserve to have the communists just take over. I mean, because you're lost to humanity. And there's something in that. But he's basically what's great about G.K. Chesterton is he understands what's important about democracy, right? If you get really philosophical, or if you get really into market fundamentalism, or if you get into heady ideologies, a lot of times you can become anti-democratic because you think you know the right way. And there's something to that, meaning Plato and Aristotle were critical of democracy, and our founders were critical of democracy for a very good reason. Democracies have all sorts of problems. They tend to scapegoat things. They tend to, I mean, if you gave them control over the marketplace directly, that would go haywire almost instantaneously.
Yeah.
So there are legitimate critiques by especially the ancient Greeks, who were mostly aristocratic. They had valid critiques of the democracy. However, in the end, you're always siding with the democracy. You're always, in the end, as an American at least, and as somebody following the English tradition, as Chesterton was, you side with the democracy because there's something to it, that the elites, no matter how smart they get, the Platos, the Aristotles, the scholastics, whatever, they get lost in that and can lose touch with the people. And the people will always have something that they do not. A quote by William F. Buckley kind of touches on this when he says, I always thought that the American people were the average American is just a little bit above average.
Yeah.
It's that kind of trust in the wisdom of the people. And what is that wisdom? Well, it's not a technical wisdom, right? Like the elites might have, but it's the kind of wisdom that makes you always want to have a jury. Right. You always want to have trial by jury. You do not want to have. Oh, and this is another Buckley quote that's on this very topic. He says, "I'd rather be ruled by the first 200 names or 2,000 names in the Boston telephone directory than by the entire Harvard faculty.
Yeah.
Those things are true because you know that there's a certain kind of practical wisdom in the people that gets lost, especially amongst elites.
Yeah.
And so Chesterton touches upon that a lot, and William F. Buckley talks about that a lot. So socialism appeals to the democracy in a way that's poetically right, meaning it touches it and it hits on something that the people understand. And what the people understand is never technical knowledge, like I was saying before. It's narrative knowledge. It's why religion tends to stick in the democracy in the way that it doesn't with the elites. Elites tend towards atheism. The democracy tends to keep its religion. And it's because they have a way of staying in touch with narrative truth. And so socialism kind of preys on that a little bit. It's fighting for the people against the elites and whatnot. And so there's always this kind of you have to understand why it appeals, right? This is why we were able to predict that none of these idiotic, stupid statements that Ocasio-Cortez makes are going to bring her down, because she's touching the heart of something. She's telling the right story, even if she's way off her rocker. And the problem with democracy is when someone leads you, when someone can lead the democracy by touching that heart in the wrong way, the democracy go, right? You can really lead a democracy astray very easily if you're telling a compelling narrative and pulling people in. That's a key point to her
shtick, democratic socialist too.
Yeah, that's why it's democratic socialism.
Yeah,
exactly. And so it's just important to know why it touches here. So conservatives need to know why socialism is poetically true, even if they're going to critique it. You know what I'm saying?
So I think there's a lot of truth to that point, actually, because there is the reason why there's been so much success, at least also recently too, with the rise of socialism, is that Bernie Sanders told a story about why he believes in socialism. And that is because concentrated wealth in the top 1% is evil, because that top 1% looks at the guys in America, the average Joe, says, we don't care about you. We don't care about you. We are in it for ourselves. And that is why the democracy says, fine, screw those guys. I'm in it for all the average Joes. We need to do this. Socialism. And that is part of why Marxism, that's actually a part of the Marxist persuasive argument, and that's the view of history, and that is what is to come.
Workers of the world, unite. We're going to free ourselves from our chains.
And that's why it's so powerful and why it's so appealing. And conservatives today, like Charlie Kirk, such as myself, such as yours, are so pro-capitalist because Reagan basically inculcated us with the idea that it is a good thing. But it is not a good thing because I have an iPhone here right now and I'm texting like 5 people at one time. It's not because of that. It's because he made capitalism a part of the story about the individual, that you get to keep the fruits of your labor, and that through that story, you get to live out your life and pursue happiness. And that is why capitalism is such an important part of the conservative ideology. Right. It is not a collective. It's a duty to the collective, whereas it marginalizes the individual and makes their story less unique than that of the community. It is Reagan's story saying, no, every person in America, you, and I'm speaking to you, are important, and your fruits of your labor are important, and you should keep them, and it empowers you to pursue happiness. And that is why I think conservatives need to get back into this story where they're talking about capitalism is important to pursuing happiness. It's important to recognize that you are important and that your work deserves recognition and that you should keep that.
Right. I would even say spiritual. Right.
Spiritual. Yes.
Tucker Carlson in his recent monologue that's been viral and everybody's trying to get a response to it, basically made the exact point you just made. And I think the one word that should have been in there that wasn't was the word spiritual, because the story that Reagan's telling is that, again, you were exactly right when you mentioned the iPhone.
Yes.
We're not conservatives because America is so wealthy and we love wealth. We're so pro-capitalist because we believe that kind of the freedom to keep your own labor is empowering. When a poor person gets stuff from the government and becomes part of a collective that gives him meaning, that's less. That's deficient from the kind of
Yes.
spiritual fulfillment we want for them. We want them to be able to hold the fruits of their own labor and be part of a different community, not one where they're just receiving handouts, but one that they can be
Exactly.
actively participating in. And I think Tucker Carlson and you both nailed that in that particular rant.
But I want to say this to conservatives too, because we all look at some of the dumb stuff that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says, and we're just like, what is this? That won't be enough to beat her, like as Norman said.
Yeah.
What beats her is finding a candidate that tells the same story that Reagan did. Reagan was exceptional by telling that story, and we need to find somebody else that encapsulates that story as he did. I want to beat Ocasio-Cortez. You want to beat Ocasio-Cortez. So let's actually beat her and find that person.
Amen.
Yay, amen.
All right.
So, but I want to get to the rest of the interview too, because it's still very interesting. Because we talked about today in conservative ideology, there's a bit of a schism right now, and I asked Charlie about it. How there's a conflict right now between neoconservatism and, frankly, the nationalist Reagan sect of conservatism. Excuse me, right now, and I want to go to that clip right now.
All right.
What do you think is going on right now? Are you seeing a shift in the way the conservative movement is going, where President Trump is having some sort of permanent impact on the movement?
Oh, without a doubt, and for the better. He has opened and liberated the conversation on a couple key issues that we were never allowed to talk about. For example, conservative Republicans had never been allowed to challenge orthodox foreign policy. It was almost as if the more wars, the better. Like, I love us seeing withdrawing troops from Syria, like wonderful. Withdrawing troops from Afghanistan, terrific. You know, like we should not be the party of endless war. And I'm not one to say to close the bases down. I actually support the base structure in Japan and South Korea and Europe. I think that American foreign policy presence internationally has been a net positive for good in the last 60 years. I just don't know what the good can come in Syria right now that the Syrian civil war is over.
Yeah.
You know, I don't quite. Assad has won. Sorry, like he's a horrible person. Mm-hmm. You know, some people call him modern day Hitler. He's won the civil war. Okay, so either we're gonna put 100,000 ground troops and go after Assad and start another Iraq war and further destabilize the region, or we say we're going to bring our boys home. It's not really the top priority of American foreign policy right now. The foreign policy number one, immigration. Trump has totally changed the conversation on immigration in such an amazing way. Mm-hmm. You know, it's almost as if Republican Party used to be for like not as open borders. It essentially is what the Republican Party used to be for. Now we're for strong borders, big wall, and bigger door, and I think that's, something that Trump has really given people permission to be able to talk about immigration in a way that we have not had in the last 20 or 30 years. And even Reagan's biggest regret was offering amnesty for all those illegal immigrants, and he was not able to get the wall done, was not able to get border security done. Mm-hmm. And the final issue that he's been able is political correctness. Political correctness is a cancer destroying our country from within, because it is a tool used to silence those that speak the truth.
Yeah, I agree, certainly in that last point too. I want to also sort of jump back to that last point that you made, because some people looked at, because President Trump, I think he announced that he's going to be withdrawing troops from Syria, or is in the process, yes. And there's like a divide there, because some people, well, let me ask you this way. What do you think of the argument where some people say, I like that President Trump has been tougher on Iran, like he should be, because they're a threat to liberty everywhere.
Sure, they should. We should be tough on Iran, yes.
And when you remove the the American presence from Syria, then they're more likely to be a puppet government of Iran. And that,
well, I don't know about that. I mean, Syria is really divided into three different...
This gets tricky, but I just want to...
Yeah, but just to synthesize it, you basically, in the two big buckets, you have the pro-Assad forces and then you have the Kurds. And that's about it. What does success look like? That's the question we have to always ask.
Yeah.
What does success look like? No one knows.
Yeah.
Okay, a reason to have troops in a country because Iran might have influence is a horrible reason. Assad is in control of Syria. That sucks.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want him there. You don't want him there. Mm-hmm. Anyone who loves freedom doesn't want Assad in power. Okay, we're not going to destabilize him probably in the next 10 to 20 years. It's going to take another people's revolution, God forbid, another. I don't want to see another civil war happen. Mm-hmm. What does success look like with Iran? Having them not get nuclear weapons. That, you know, so you have to always ask the question. If you don't have an answer of what success looks like, you should not have, you know, troops there. So what does success look like in Germany? Preventing another, you know, European conflict similar to World War I or World War II. What does success look like in the Asian perimeter? Preventing another, you know, Japan from rising up. And, you know, so our troops there have prevented those happening in the last 60 years. And American foreign policy presence in those regions has prevented it, but not in the Middle East. The more troops we put in the Middle East, the more conflict there is. So not all regions are the same.
This answer from Charlie Kirk has got to be the one that got the most rah-rahs out of me by almost any pundit anywhere for a long time. I've never seen somebody get exactly right what needs to be gotten right about the view of Reagan that has been so tarnished by the dissent of especially neoconservatives, but basically all Bush era establishment conservatives since Reagan. There's just been this decline. And he hit all of the points that were exactly right. War. We need to have Ronald Reagan said, when asked about his policy with the Soviet Union, his answer was, we win, they lose. That was literally his answer.
It's clear cut.
And that is what got the American people to be, yes, we are going to defeat them. Right? And that's good. And that's what we needed to. But the neoconservatives today and Bush, the whole entire Bush era was just a muddy mess of this. We're going to go after Iraq. And when we pull him down, we're going to stick around and try to nation build and whatever, and just have our hand in a bunch of different places. It doesn't make any sense. We're not telling that same line. We're not saying we win, they lose anywhere in the world anymore. We're just kind of a presence here. We're a security force there. So exactly right on that. Also right on immigration. One of the very few pundits who I've seen really nail what the conservative impetus is on immigration. And it comes directly from Reagan. Reagan failed on two things. One, Sandra Day O'Connor, and two, the border security never materializing. And he, of all people, passing Reagan, it wasn't necessarily a failure to pass amnesty. That's the thing that most conservatives today will be like, amnesty, no way. We've just been so against it for so long.
No, but your point is
okay. Yeah, but with Reagan, the idea was amnesty comes with border security so that we end the future problem, solve the current problem that we don't want to solve with the deportations, right? Yeah. So it's one that we're going to just come into the middle like that, and we're gonna have amnesty one time, once and for all. With that failure, that's when conservatives were like, never again amnesty, ever. And then Trump turned that situation around, where he's actually put DACA on the table again, with one caveat, the wall. And the wall is just that symbolic thing that we're going to take security seriously. And so he seems to get that and get that the Republican Party has been basically not as open borders, since they have been unwilling to do what Trump has proposed to do with the border situation. I don't know if you know this, but Bernie Sanders actually, the Democratic Party, it's not an accident that they find all these clips of Chuck Schumer saying we need to have a wall. And Hillary Clinton saying we need to have a wall. The Democratic Party was on the opposite side of Republicans. Until recently. Bernie Sanders, the most crazy off the rocker left wing guy, was basically saying, "What, open borders? No, that's a Koch brothers proposal." He was blaming the Koch brothers for being open borders. He was the one who was for the American working man, who was not going to have all this competitive,
like Trump is right now. Yeah, exactly. But he's being disingenuous now because he wouldn't vote for the wall, Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders was exposed as a Democrat shill when he supported. Seriously. Yeah. When his in the primary, when he just took off, I don't think he could do that again because of his support for Hillary. That was such a sellout, and that's why I think Ocasio-Cortez is the new Bernie Sanders. She's taking she hasn't sold out yet. I mean, she'll have to if she ever is going to put a policy in place, but still, she hasn't yet, and so she's going to take over that wing of the party because Bernie Sanders used to be that. But even still, Trump now is the I'm for the working union guy. He's just taken over that entire narrative. And on immigration, Charlie Kirk's the only one who's pointed out that history correctly, Reagan's history, and why conservatives are the way they are, and he gets that. And of course, on political correctness.
Yeah, I wanted to make a point on that too, because that's one of the reasons why, personally, I love when Trump does stuff like that. Because, like, well, for example, the national anthem thing. Everybody saw when players would kneel during the national anthem, and you're like, "Come on, that's a crappy thing to do." But then they heard it's free speech. You can't say anything to object to that because you'd be objecting against someone's free speech. And then people were like, "Okay, fine, I'm just gonna have to deal with this." And then Trump's like, gets on the bully pulpit, the platform, and he's like, "Tell those SOBs you're fired." Like, that's what everybody is thinking. Yes. Thank you so much.
You can even imagine the Bush response. Right?
Yes.
If he even addresses it at all,
yeah.
He'll be out there and, we're all Americans, and just bland milk toast,
kinder, gentler, and compassionate.
Exactly. And meanwhile, you let multi-million-dollar privileged athletes trash talk their country on subjects they have no knowledge of, and you'll have mega corporations foisting that on a demographic that is the most pro-America demographic in the country. Yeah. Why do we let that happen? Because Bushes would have just sat there on their hands in noble fashion and been like, this is the kind of stuff that we're supposed to take as Americans. This is our punishment or something. Or
they would even maybe say that kneeling is a form of respect, and this is why they're highlighting an issue that they find
to turn it around. Yeah.
But it's like, no, Trump doesn't take that. It's like, that's bullcrap. It started off with them sitting down, Colin Kaepernick sitting down. And that's not really that's pretty mean-spirited, I'd say, of a movement. It doesn't show for any sort of patriotism.
He's not apologetic. He's he's taking the conservative gut response and just made it policy. Exactly. Whatever the conservative would just think, it's become policy. And it feels liberating to all of Republicans who have basically, under both Bush and Obama, told all those things you feel, those are evil in some way.
Yeah. And it's Trump saying, no, it's completely good for you to say, that's crappy. You shouldn't disrespect our country, our flag, or our anthem, the symbol of hope and liberty.
Another amen.
Amen. Amen. So I want to get to the other thing that we talked about, too, which was pretty deep, and it has to do with criminal justice reform. The First Step Act was signed into law at the end of 2018. But I asked Charlie Kirk, what do you think is the second step? It's called the first step. What do you think should be the second step?
So that was a really interesting question. Yeah, let's play that.
I think I wanted to also ask you about what you and Candace have been doing for the First Step Act. We saw that it passed the Senate. I think it's going
to get signed any day now. And I already passed the House.
It already. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it'll get signed any day now.
Law. So what do you expect to be the second step? Because this is called the First Step Act.
Yeah.
What do you call it?
School choice. It has to be school choice. So this is fixing the people that are exiting prisons not get back into prisons. Okay, fine. Why are they going to prison in the first place? Broken public schools. Number one reason. The broken family might actually be ahead of that, but the broken public schools have led to the complete and total destruction of these high incarceration rates. Mm-hmm. And it's because of, public sector teacher unions. Public sector teacher unions are the greatest threat to freedom and liberty and the individual in America. Bottom line, bar none. And so the fixing our public education system by liberating school choice is the most proven method to lift the most people out of poverty and give them opportunity. Yeah. And hopefully bring fathers back in the home, enrich our society, and not have people go to prison. And it's not a black issue, it's not a white issue, it's an American issue. And so that should be the second step. Like, okay, we have fixed the recidivism issue. Hopefully we have learned from the states that have done this well, the credit system, the earned use system. I'm totally in support of that. Now let's prevent the next 100,000 people from getting there in the first place.
So I spoke to Candace too, and I only have two more questions. But and I asked her, what is your overall position on where the justice system should be in the government? Should it be towards rehabilitation or should it be a retributive system?
It depends on your crime. So, I mean, if you're a rapist, I have no interest in rehabilitating you.
Well, she took the position that rehabilitation, but I would like to get...
No, I mean, we can disagree on certain things. Candace and I don't agree on everything, but it depends on the crime. If you are a rapist, there is no rehabilitation.
Yeah.
If you are a murderer, there is no rehabilitation. Lock them up and throw away the key. Mm-hmm. Okay? Yeah. It's that simple. Yeah. But if you are, if you did securities trading, right,
Yeah.
a white collar crime, or if you trafficked drugs, and you were 18, okay, what led you to to do that? I think there's some rehab that has to. There are certain horrors and certain levels of crime where no resources should be spent in rehabilitation. Life in prison, never get out, so on and so forth. I think convicted rapists with DNA evidence should never be let out of prison. Okay. And the average rapist gets 6 years in prison. They re-enter in society and they have a high likelihood of raping again. It's sick. Yeah. So that, I mean, our criminal justice system is so screwed up that way. And so people say, well, should jails be rehabilitation, or should it be about just punishment? Well, it depends on what they did to get there, right? I mean, not all crimes are the same, and no one, arson is not the same as murder, and so so on and so forth.
I liked that answer a lot. He really he had an answer right like that.
Yeah, immediately right after I asked him.
Yeah, that was impressive. What do you want for the second step? Boom, school choice. So I did like that he really knew where he was going with that. I wish he would get together with Candace, because you were talking about how you had interviewed Candace as you were mentioning the question, and that was something that I was disappointed with. Is she got on the bandwagon of the First Step Act pretty quickly, and I think if she had known what was really good for that cause, she could have pulled a Larry Elder kind of thing and said, while she's advocating the Van Jones let him out of jail policy, she could also play the Larry Elder card and be like, now pull your stuff up by the bootstraps.
Yeah. And I asked her about that in another interview, like I said, and I asked her, what do you consider to be the second step? And she told me that she didn't have an answer at the time. She said she'll point to things that she likes, that things that are in a good direction. And I was like, okay, and I'd like to ask Charlie next. And then he said school choice. And I think that Candace is, her instincts are, or at least her heart is in the right place. And that if she heard that answer too, and it was explained to her, I think that she would be on board with school choice as the second step too.
Yeah, she'll probably be on board with school choice on principle. But the fact that she hadn't thought through that, she needs to, because if she plays that, if the conservatives react to her saying, we are all in lockstep on this issue, all black conservatives, she means, we're all in lockstep on this issue, and we really need to change the prison, the way prisons work so that we can end recidivism. And conservatives are like, I just heard about this right now. This is kind of weird. You're doing an identity politics kind of thing, it seems like to me. Yeah. And she could avoid that totally if she would go straight to the second step and say, now, I want, pull up your pants, that kind of message. And if she did that, I think she could really sell the policy, because Trump was already going to do it anyways. And so that I think there was just something missed there, where you could have added to the mercy element, now make sure that you go out and be good fathers. You go out and you change, show that you've changed, so that this because think about it, if this policy goes into effect and then it has a bad result, that doesn't help anyone, right? If people go back and commit crimes again, if recidivism still happens, that won't be good for anyone. So the message of,
and that's why when he said, there are certain, it depends on the crime. Like if you said in a funny way, if you're a rapist, I have no intention of rehabilitating you. You can't be rehabilitated. I'm like, I totally agree. I'd love to have him back on a podcast just discussing the broad issues and stuff like that. Because for me, the one thing about the rehabilitation versus the retributive system of justice for me is that you need to actually look at what is justice, right? And the point of having a justice system is to meet an injustice. It's not to say that it's the point of desert. Like as you pointed out in your article with C.S. Lewis writing about, it's about what a person deserves, and it's to right a wrong. Where there is bad, good meets it. Where there is justice, injustice, a just thing meets it. And so that's why you need to have a justice system that's based on I don't even like the term punitive. It's about retribution. It's about what has been done wrong will be made right. That is the point of a justice system. And I think Charlie does a good point, or analyzes it well, and says when there is wrong happens, like if you murder someone, if you rape someone, like he's onto it. He says why would you rehabilitate somebody like that? They're going to go back and do more crime. What matters in those cases, especially like that, is about righting the wrong. So I'd love to get a little bit deeper into that, but
and because he did he said he created a dichotomy there where he's like, bad crimes, justice only. Small crimes, let's have some mercy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would too like to get into the deeper issue of rehabilitative justice and just the whole idea of what happens to a society when they start thinking that they can cure even petty crimes. Like when you take somebody who's been in the drug business or drug trade or whatever, and you, instead of punishing them, you have the government do some kind of rehab policy that puts them, moving into we're going to cure your social ill rather than punish you for a crime does have its own problems, and it would be interesting to talk to him. But I do think overall his dichotomy there works.
And if you ask somebody 9 times out of 10 if they have a voucher to send their child to a private school to get a good education, to be involved in a good environment, people will do that. I think
I'm 100% on with the idea of school choice.
Yeah.
I think more than that is necessary for a second step with regards to the First Step Act. I think you need the get back out there into the culture and be good fathers message. But when it comes to school choice, I mean, I was rah with him the whole time when he said that. I mean, even the bit about teachers unions. Yes, they are the most overpraised institution in the entire country. Teachers can do no wrong. They're there for the kids. They're just these wonderful people. They're never self-interested. They want smaller class sizes. It's just for the kids. It's not because they want less work. So I totally agree with him that on all of that. And I think privatizing schooling is the one thing this country needs more than anything else is privatized schooling. But that's probably a topic for next time podcast.
Next time, So I want to thank Charlie Kirk again for taking the time to speak with me. I really do appreciate it. If you'd like to follow Charlie on Twitter, follow him at CharlieKirk11. And if you'd like to follow Turning Point USA on Twitter, follow them at TPUSA. You can follow myself at Tony D. Leonardi, Norman at Norman G. Young, and follow us on Twitter at Politics Outside. Follow us on Facebook at Think Outside Politics, and then subscribe to our YouTube channel at Think Outside Politics. We appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you next week. Think outside politics, yeah.